Gay USA, a community experience. Tonight's event is co-hosted by the GLBT Historical Society and Frameline. My name is Terry Beswick, and I'm the Executive Director of the GLBT Historical Society. And this evening, I'm really excited to introduce our three wonderful panelists in a moment, but also all of you for joining us in watching and discussing Gay USA, Arthur J. Bressan Jr.'s groundbreaking 1977 documentary, which vibrantly captured Gay Freedom Day marches and celebrations in June 1977 across the country. The film was beautifully restored in 2018 by the University of California, Los Angeles Film and Television Archive in collaboration with Frameline and Outfest. So this event is being co-hosted by Frameline, a fantastic San Francisco organization that aims to change the world through the power of queer cinema. Founded in 1977, actually the same year that this film came out, the Frameline Film Festival is the longest running, largest, and most widely recognized LGBTQ+ film exhibition event in the world. The Frameline 44 Festival, previously postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, will be held virtually next month, September 17th through 27th, 2020. And the full lineup of films will be announced this Tuesday, August 25th. Tickets will be available that day at frameline.org. So, founded in 1985, the GLBT Historical Society is recognized internationally as a leader in the field of LGBTQ public history. While both our archives and museum are currently closed to visitors due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have a growing and fabulously rich array of exhibitions, events, and archival resources at glbthistory.org. Please check it out, and while you're there, consider becoming a card-carrying member of the GLBT Historical Society. And thank you to all our members and sponsors and those who donated to tonight's free event. Your donations make all our work possible. So one program note, this event is being recorded, and the intro and post-screening discussion will be posted to our website. If you are watching with us live on Zoom, we welcome your active participation in the forum, but please post any comments in the chat at any time. And if you have questions for one or more of the panelists, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So now on to introducing tonight's panelists, and after I'm done, I'm gonna hop off and watch with all of you. So the panelists will introduce tonight's film and will encourage you all to join in a discussion following the screening. First, Jenni Olson. We're delighted to have Jenni with us tonight. Jenni guided the restoration of Gay USA and has been making connections between queer films and the audiences who need to see them for more than 30 years. She is one of the world's leading experts on LGBTQ cinema history and was also one of the founders of planetout.com. I remember that. She is currently an independent consultant and is also an acclaimed writer and filmmaker. Her latest film project is The Royal Road. Don Romesburg is a professor of women's and gender studies at Sonoma State University and is a co-founder of the GLBT Historical Society Museum and recently co-curated our online exhibition, Labor of Love, The Birth of San Francisco Pride, 1970 through 80. He is editor of the Routledge History of Queer America in 2018 and has published queer takes on public history, histories of adolescence, sex work, transracial adoption, and queer trans performers. He was the lead scholar working to bring LGBTQ content into California's K-12 history, social science framework and textbooks, and now trains educators on the implementation. For these efforts, he is the namesake of the Committee on LGBT History's Don Romesburg Prize for K-12 curriculum, and he's a core member of the GLBT Historical Society family. It's nice to see you, John. And finally, joining Jenni and Don will be Robert Baez, a PhD candidate in the Department of Sociology and Criminology and Law at the University of Florida. He uses community-based methods to instigate meaningful social change. His current project documents contemporary queer and intersectional formations of pride and situates these mobilizations in contrast to the mainstream gay rights movement. So, with no further ado, thank you all again for joining us. We're honored to have you. And with that, I will get out of the way and watch the discussion and film with all of our reviewers. Thank you all.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. And I'll just start and give a little intro, and then Robert and Don can chime in. First of all, I'm super excited everyone's here, and want to urge everyone to, so we kind of came up with this as this idea of making the most of Zoom and making this be a participatory public history event. So Gay USA was shot at Gay Freedom Day in June of 1977 and released in August of 1977. It's kind of incredible from a film production standpoint. And we love the idea that maybe there are some people here joining us who were there in 1977 or were around. Maybe you'll recognize people and can chime in and contribute. And Don, I think you said you'll, the Historical Society will kind of make this be part of public history at the Historical Society. Can you say anything more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, what we'll be doing is we will be recording and preserving this chat, right? And then this will become a part of the archive. So when people, future people, right, go and look at this amazing documentary, they'll be able to have this other kind of meta text, right, that is bringing more conversation. And Jenni and I have talked about this before, how at so many programs, both film screenings and programs, other kinds of programs and readings, these remarkable things come out, right, that are shared with everybody in the room, and then they go away, right? And so we want to take advantage of the fact that we have this virtual space where we can also document and record what we have. So really, if you notice somebody and you're like, oh, I'm echoing, okay, let me, is that better? Am I echoing now? Do people hear the sound? Anyway, okay. So anyway, so we would be absolutely thrilled to hear from you, even if it's just, oh my God, that was my ex-lover, or I was a part of that organization, or that organization, right, checked me out because of X, right? We love to hear any of that in the chat. So as dynamic as, this is as dynamic as you all make it in terms of how we experience this film.
Yeah. So let's see, I have like all these notes. I just want to say, I wanted to start by saying, well, thank you to the Historical Society and to Frameline and to the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project that did the restoration. It's beautiful. And a special thanks to Frameline donor Michael Halton, who his generosity really made this possible. And I love the idea that, you know, as individuals, we can actually participate in preserving our favorite films. And so thank you to Michael. So I wanted to give a little context just so you can get the most out of the film. So like I said, this in June of 1977, it's Gay Freedom Day. So the month of June, just so you get the context that this is, that we're arriving at, June 8th was Orange Tuesday, when Anita Bryant, you know, worked to repeal the gay rights ordinance in Miami. That was June 8th. 2 weeks later, California State Senator John Briggs announced the Briggs Initiative to ban gay teachers from teaching in public schools. June 21st was the gay bashing murder of Robert Hillsborough in San Francisco. And Pride, or the Gay Freedom Day was June 26th, so 5 days later. So Arthur Bressan, who was a pioneering gay filmmaker, he had made a couple of shorts, and he had made an gay adult film called Passing Strangers that had come out in 1974. He, at the beginning of June, decided that he wanted to make Gay USA and enlisted these camera crews around the country. And so Gay USA is mainly shot in San Francisco, but it also includes footage of the New York Pride event, LA, Chicago, and San Diego. And you'll see the shifts in the footage, the kind of footage quality changes in the different cities, and you'll see the different, you know, landmarks in the different cities. anyway, so that's like the context that it's coming out in. And then, like I said, he cut the film really fast, and it came out at the end of August. It actually world premiered at the Castro at the end of August, which is literally 43 years ago this month, like this week, probably. Um, and anyway, it's a beautiful film. And what else do I need to tell you? Oh, and then, so that was August. Fast forward to November. What happens in November? Harvey Milk is elected supervisor. So it was an incredible year, 1977. Oh, this is so great. Randy Alfred is here. Wow. So yeah, it was a midnight premiere at the Castro. Thank you, Randy. This is really exciting. Just a couple other little things I want you to look out for. The film includes this really amazing footage from the 1970 Christopher Street Liberation Day parade, which was the first Pride, if you will. And you'll notice that comes in, I'll point it out as it's about to happen. It shifts to black and white, and you see a big sign that says Christopher Street Liberation Day, and we're getting the history of Stonewall, and so keep an eye out for that. There's also footage from several other earlier Gay Freedom Day parades. And my favorite thing about the film is that it features a really fantastic poem by Pat Parker, the African-American lesbian poet, San Francisco icon, and we'll point out in the chat when that's coming up. And I guess, Robert, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what we talked about earlier? And
yeah, sure. I guess one thing that I would definitely, I'm going to be paying attention to and would ask others as well is to maybe think about the differences or comparing how prides are ran today versus what we're going to be seeing in the film. And so, yeah, that's definitely one theme that I'm going to be keeping track of.
Yeah, that's great. And it's really cool to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and so somebody in the chat already is like talking about it, and they used to say off the sidewalk and into the street, and how that has very much changed. And so I would encourage others to keep that going.
That's great. And I think, yeah, I mean, it's great that there's also a lot of discussion within the film about kind of what was, issues at the time, or there's like a whole conversation about kind of lesbians being offended by drag, and the kind of the politics of that, and stuff about butch femme, the word dyke. Anyway, it's interesting kind of in terms of the times, how the times have changed. Two things. We're almost ready to start. Pay attention to the music. It's an entire original soundtrack of gay folk songs, like written originally for the film. And they're beautifully earnest and sometimes maybe a little cheesy, but I think in a way that is just, I love them, and I find it like so emotional. And then I wanted to say, I noticed we also have with us Arthur's sister, Ro Bressan is here, which is really wonderful. And Ro and I kind of co-run the Bressan Project, which is devoted to the restoration and re-release of all of Arthur's films. And we can talk a little bit more about that later after we watch the film. And I think that's it. Do you guys have any other things to say? Should we get started? Lee, do you want to cue the movie? Wow.
Wow, right?
I'm totally crying.
Oh.
Oh.
Um, oh man, that was so great.
Mhm.
I've seen it like, I don't know, a dozen times in the last couple of years. Multiple amazing public screenings. And this was really, really cool. Thank you guys, everybody, for participating. And like,
Yeah.
what a special, like, extra special thing. I hate Zoom, and we like made it different. We made use of it. Now I'm
Yeah,
like,
I just want to say how uh, in this pandemic moment, right? I it's hard to put words to how moving it is to see that kind of embodied collectivity, right, of everyone together like that. And of course, this precedes the AIDS epidemic, which makes it all the more poignant. But to be doing it in this moment of this pandemic, when we're all struggling with so much isolation, is really, it's really something to see it in this context. I've never watched it with this, with the kind of feeling of longing that I've had this time. So
yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I'm just looking at the comments.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, which is
Yeah.
exciting.
The restoration was really amazing, as Ro points out. Let's see. Robert, do you have any words of wisdom?
Yeah, yes. Well, a lot of people picked up on stuff, which is really cool to see. People were talking about the lack of barricades and that you see at parades now, which really separates people who are marching or participating, and then people who are more passive and just, you know, on the side observing things that are going on. And I think also the people commented on the lack of corporations, at least visibly, with floats in the parades. There was also, yeah, the
I just
corporate
want to say,
floats.
in relationship to that, can I say the only
Yeah.
place that I remember seeing a corporation is the boycott Coors signs.
Mm.
So anyway, go ahead.
No, it's just really exciting because there's so much movement now around these issues of getting police out of Pride, of getting corporations out of Pride, and to reflect and watch a documentary that really centers the community's history, and sort of where Stuart talks about this a little bit in the first few years. It was really political, and then it moves into more of like a celebration. And there's just still ongoing, you know, contentions between, is this a celebration? Is this political? And those are very much themes that we still continue to see today.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, like the sense that, right, this is only, whatever, it's the 8 years after Stonewall, like it's
Right.
and I love all the banners and the, you know, and the sense of the, you know, kind of hippie and very lefty ethos. The anarchists for gay rights, the socialists, I love the, and then the fun stuff like legalize amyl nitrate, like, and all the, obviously all the Anita Bryant stuff. And sorry.
It's okay. I want to say that one thing that's striking in the way in which this comes together, which makes it especially with that last part, comparing sort of the March of the Nazis, right, with like the collective gathering of like weird and wonderful individuals who all come together and just gather into this magical collectivity of individuals, right? Like, it's a beautiful and it's romantic gesture, right? But we know from doing the exhibit, right, that there was a tremendous amount of logistics behind putting together a Pride like this, right? If you're going to have 200 to 300,000 people showing up somewhere, right, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of working with the city that goes into it. There's a lot of working with just the sheer logistics of like, setting up booths and like how many booths are there going to be and who's going to march and in what order, and the contingents that organize around sort of visibility and what they're going to be able to put forward. And so I think that there's a way in which this documentary erases the labor of Pride, right? Or of Gay Freedom Day in favor of this vision of it as a movement, right? Which is very interesting for me, having done the exhibit. And if you check out the exhibit, you'll see that we actually focus on some of just the work that goes into Pride. That's why it's called Labor of Love, right? Why do people keep showing up to put this on every year when it's such a contentious, bitter struggle every year, and everyone's always complaining about it, right? So.
Yeah. Let's see, I'm just trying to catch up with are there any questions? Shall we take questions from the?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this has been such a great, unless Jenni, you have closing, like, or you have like some little ending, like you want to say something at the end of it. I mean, you can wrap at the end, but.
Yeah, I will have a little wrap at the end. I will say there was one thing I wanted to say, but I didn't want to interrupt because it was Stuart's great moment towards the end there where he refers to, he says, the drag queens, the hair fairies. He makes reference to the hair fairies, which my understanding is that was old school slang for transsexuals. Is that?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, maybe other people can chime in on this, but certainly I understand hair fairy to be a term for street queens, as well as what would have been called sort of fairies back in the early 20th century, right? Which is sort of people who sort of blend different sort of masculine and feminine gender presentations in their street life, right? In their life out on, in sort of in the public sphere. And so hair fairies, you know, it's so interesting to talk about, especially with young people today, about what trans was back then, because the language is so profoundly different now than it was back then, that it's almost hard to make a kind of clear translation of the categories of today into what these terms meant back then. But hair fairies were absolutely part of, for example, what was happening around the Compton's cafeteria riot, you know, along with trans women, sex workers, and so on.
And maybe to bring it to the chat a little bit,
Yeah.
Paul said, and how back then the New York City parade started in Washington Square and went up 5th and ended in Central Park, as opposed to now. And I can speak to that a little bit because last year the Reclaim Pride Coalition in New York City organized the Queer Liberation March, which actually went back to this route. Where we started in the Village and then went up 5th to end with a rally in Central Park, as opposed to the New York City Pride Parade route. Now people call it a route to nowhere because they've changed it so many times according to what the police are suggesting the route should be, and doesn't really have any sort of like historic roots to the community. And so along with the Reclaim Pride Coalition, there are many community-based or grassroots organizations around these states that are really taking this movement seriously and trying to bring a little bit back of that grassroots or historicness to this event.
Terry says we need to bring back hair fairies. A significant number of participants had been smoking pot. Yes.
Probably.
Then as now, right, exactly. Yeah. Now legally.
Yeah, there's a question here about, so Artie's first feature was a film called Passing Strangers that came out in 1974, and which we recently also did a restoration of, and it is actually now available on pinklabel.tv exclusively on streaming. And so in that film, he featured a pride parade. And so the question is, did the making of that movie directly move him into making this documentary? I'm not sure about directly per se. I do know that like he was always interested in Gay Freedom Day, and so he made in 1972 a short documentary that we saw a bunch of footage, that kind of black and white sequence with the great, like all the bearded gay men was from 1972, and that was a short called Coming Out. And then he made Passing Strangers in 74, which featured footage from Coming Out, and then also new footage that he shot that was so great. He had his protagonists, the two gay leads of the film, go to Pride, and he shot them there like as their characters. And so he had footage of 1974 Pride, you know, with his actors walking around. And then, you know, 1977, this. So anyway, that's the answer to that. Are folks putting other questions in here? Ro says he loved the parades. So he already died in 1987, in July of 1987. And the last year when he couldn't attend, he had a good friend call him from phone booths along the route. So I think that I do want to say a little bit of context about Artie and his films and this history. So when he died in 1987, Ro actually donated all like boxes and boxes of his negatives and film elements to Frameline. And when I arrived at Frameline in 1991, I was co-director of the festival in 92, 93, 94. When I arrived, all the boxes were there at Frameline, and I was like, what is all this stuff? In a sad story, Ro, in the meantime, at some point in there in the 90s, moved, and we lost touch with her. Frameline lost touch with her. And since we didn't have a contact around the rights for the films, they sat in those boxes all these years. And at one point they were at Oddball Films for about 10 years. And so all of his films basically fell out of distribution. And so, you know, I think it's one of the reasons that they just aren't as well known. And so it was just a couple of years ago that I finally managed to reconnect with Ro, and we started the Bressan project and started doing these restorations. And we released, restored and re-released Buddies a couple of years ago, which is from 1985, which was his last film, and which is the first film about AIDS. Someone had posted in the chat about that. And then we did Gay USA, and we just also did Forbidden Letters. This is my like little starting to wrap up here. Forbidden Letters, which came out in 1979, which is his other gay adult feature, also beautiful 16 millimeter. And at midnight tonight, it's premiering on pinklabel.tv. I'm going to be up late posting and getting the word out. So, and that has not been available, you know, for all these years.
Wow.
Anyway, so it's been a really exciting time to get his work out there. And so Randy posted about Artie's memorial. Right.
I'm wondering if we should unpack the Butch Femme West Coast East Coast lesbian thing. Beth Elliott, hi Beth, writing in right? That prior to Stonewall, it wasn't just an erotic preference, right? But a mandatory bar social code, and how, right, some women really in the 70s really talking about how they were happy that they didn't have to play those roles anymore, right? And certainly Audre Lorde writes about this in Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, and there's a lot of really great work on Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold, talking about butch femme on the East Coast or in New York, right, upstate New York, right? So it's interesting that there's a kind of framing in the film of butch femme as being about the East Coast and sort of lesbian feminism, or at least sort of a more androgynous, woman-centered kind of lesbian identity that is free, quote unquote, free from roles, right?
Yeah.
Being part of the West Coast. Jenni, I'm wondering if you have particular thoughts on that.
I think my main thought was one of the things that I really like about the film is that he just kind of, puts these differences in, and there's no resolution. It's just, here, this is what one person thinks, and this other person thinks something else. And the thing about the word dyke, of like, oh, I hate the word dyke. What do you think? I love the word dyke. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, I really like that. It's a sophisticated reflection of, the array of perspectives.
Yeah, and I really think that for a lot of bi and pan folks, right, who do not imagine that I think a lot of my students would not imagine that there was this kind of visibility and self-identification, right, happening in the 70s. It was very clearly there in some of the early photos that we were looking at for the exhibit. And not just bi, but pan, right? And that identification obviously was also in this film. Bi was all over the place, pan mentioned once. So it's significant to see how that appears here in a significant way. I think the great history of bi and pan in the 1970s has yet to be written.
And somebody wrote in the chat too that it was also a memory that lots of women use the term gay about themselves, so not just strictly using the term lesbian. And gay also is sort of making a comeback in that way, where it's used more often, like queer, where it's like an umbrella term. So it's not strictly just one particular form of sexuality either.
Tim, I appreciate your comment about the diversity of life back then versus Word Is Out. Word Is Out is so carefully curated. It's so, it has kind of a specific impulse, right, toward what it's trying to convey to the, not just to queer people, but to the world. Whereas I feel like this film is very much like by queer people for queer people. Like it doesn't necessarily imagine itself as having a wider audience than that. I don't know, Jenni, if you have a different perspective on that.
I think of both films as being very, I actually just watched Word Is Out again recently with my 21-year-old daughter, which was so great. And though had a powerful sense of that. One of the most powerful things about it as well is that you actually do have a sense that it's gay people talking to other gay people, and there's like a bunch of kind of in the actual structure of the film of where we see the filmmakers, there's like a shot in the mirror where you have the sense that like, oh, these are gay filmmakers talking to gay people. And it actually does have I don't know, that quality about it. I mean, I guess it's a little less, obviously it's not like, oh, here's all the drag queens in the streets kind of, but anyway, I think that they both have a quality of gay people speaking to each other that's very powerful, but a slightly different emphasis. I mean, I like that. I also like that, Artie has all these like homophobes and, this kind of, you're like, what? Well, why are we hearing this? And in fact, actually, I think that itself I'm actually like totally contradicting what you just said. Like that in itself, if for a mainstream audience to see that, or whatever, a straight audience to see that, of like, oh my God, these homophobic people, they're terrible. They're saying all this shit. And like, you know, that we want straight people to see that and be like, well, that's, you know, terrible. And then, you know, which makes the straight allies all the more powerful.
Right.
Which is so beautiful.
It is those like straight old ladies who are like, no, I don't have a gay kid. I just think this is fucked up, and I'm out here to show my support, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that you know, I said that maybe the wrong way. I think that Word Is Out is a more domestic film, right? Like the scene of it is domestic. The scene of it is more intimate and and this film has a much more public civic quality to it, obviously, and maybe that's what I'm responding to.
Well, and it's more like overtly political and like angry, and like he talks a lot in the interviews he did at the time. He talks a lot about anger, you know, and like, you know, all this shit was happening, like, and he was like, we should be angry. And you know, Word Is Out isn't so angry.
Yeah.
How many people have you been able to identify? Is there a project around that? I think, I mean, I think we had identified a few people, but this was amazing. There were, I mean, you guys did a great job.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with the.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited for what we've been able to do here tonight. And yeah, it's really remarkable. And I appreciate also, Gerard, what you have to say about, right, that this was a place that whatever our politics, whatever our identity, that we were coming together for a place of diversity and individuality, as opposed to a kind of sameness, right? And I think that the Nazi stuff really kind of drives that point home, right? That this marching here isn't a kind of lockstep marching in a fascist sense, but rather, right, the marching of collective, diverse individuals.
Yeah. So a comment from Randy and Troy about Arthur's adult films. So there was this criticism of Passing Strangers and Forbidden Letters. They're such amazing films. They are adult films. I mean, they are porn, but they're probably 50% narrative. And so it was this kind of thing where people who wanted a narrative feature were like, oh, there's too much sex in it. And people who wanted it to be just a porn film were like, oh, there's too much story. And in fact, Forbidden Letters, which we're releasing tonight, there was a cut of it that was just the porn. Like there was like a Betamax release in the 80s that was, you know, probably 30 minutes shorter than the film that we're releasing tonight, because they cut out all of the actual story parts. And like he was such a romantic. They're such romantic films, and I loved that segment in the film tonight, where with the music and the just the incredible affection, and it just was so romantic. I feel like we should probably start wrapping up. And
let me just say for the oh my gosh, Ro, thank you so much. Let me say to Pranay that the soundtrack is incredible, and it's all gay artists, and I put a link further up in the chat so you can go find it there. But Queer Music Heritage, which is this amazing program that's website rather, that's put together. Oh my gosh, I know the name. I'm friends with him, and now I'm spacing on his name. Gerard will put it in the chat, I'm sure, right at this moment. Anyway, Queer Music Heritage has a whole show J.D. Doyle, thank you, has a whole show that captures a radio show or a long form interview where he's talking about all of his choices around music. So that's a really great place to go for that.
And
Robert, did you have things that you wanted to sort of add as we're moving toward closing here?
No, not that I haven't already said. I'm just like following the chat. There's so much great stuff being put in there.
Yeah, so Troy was asking where we can see the film, and it is available through Vimeo on demand. I just posted the link, and just to say, I'll tell you, okay, two things. It's available via Vimeo on demand, the restored version that you just saw. It's also available through Amazon Prime, but it's not the restored version, and it does not look good. It's like an old standard definition scan of an old beat up print.
Yeah, no, that's the one I watched to prepare for this, and I have to say it was like sad trombone compared to this one. So.
Me too, and there was a huge difference. So again, congratulations.
Thank you. Ro, thank you. All right, and Gerard is pointing out that everyone should go
check out the exhibit.
Check out the exhibit, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right, and
I think that's it. Dun 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 dun. Thank you all. Really, this went better than I think we could have imagined in terms of what we were doing here, and it's really a great example of what can happen over Zoom that doesn't happen in real life, right? In the same way. So thank you for being a part of this like meta text conversation, because it was a fabulous way to experience this.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Zoom wave.
Bye.
Bye.